All right, good evening, friends. It's my good friend Chris Morris, Master Distiller, Woodford Reserve. We always enjoy chatting with Chris, and of course, one of those it's one of those rare bourbons that many folks hunt for and get to try every year. It's the King of Kentucky. We're going to be tasting with Chris. Um, this is exciting, Chris. This is some of the oldest bourbon that you at Brown Forman's released in many years.
Yes, Tom, this is our fifth year of the revival of King of Kentucky. And as you know, it's an old brand that dates back into the 1880s, acquired by Brown Forman out of the changes in the industry coming out of Prohibition. We acquired the brand in 1936.
Yes.
And it was a Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. And because of the time and needs of high volume whiskey to supply the thirst of America coming out of repeal, we converted it into a blend, an American blended whiskey, and it was very successful. Even included in one of my favorite movies, It's a Wonderful Life. But by the 1970s, times had changed and we discontinued it. Retained the trademark rights, but discontinued the product. So a few years ago, we decided to bring the King of Kentucky back, but as its original presentation, a Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. And we wanted to make it something special. And thus, these very high age, barrel strength, single barrel, unfiltered presentations. And it's, as you know, it's really garnered quite a reputation in a few short years.
No, it has, and it's seriously just some of the best older bourbons of this age that you can find. I mean, you have to look hard for this. I understand. There's two different iterations you've done this year. One is a 15-year-old that's available in Kentucky, Illinois, and Ohio, and the other, and again, that's 3,500 bottles, so that's very rare. The other, just super rare, is an 18-year-old. 250 bottles only in Kentucky. I would imagine that those 250 bottles just come from one barrel. Is that correct?
No, that's a good point, Tom.
Just wondering.
We had 12 barrels.
Yeah, 12 barrels
of that 18-year production.
Wow.
Two were empty, so we had 10 barrels.
10
so
barrels.
We're getting approximately 2.5 cases from a barrel. That's pretty low yield in the world.
That is.
Whiskey.
It's older.
Very rare.
So this is 10 barrels. 10 barrels.
Yes.
10 barrels.
And to compound this, as you and I have visited in the past, all of King of Kentucky has been in heat cycled warehousing at the Brown Forman Distillery.
Yes.
So it's much older, or in terms of maturity, than even an age claim would indicate. And that's why it has those very low yields, because it's been heated during the winter in a process that dates back to 1874. So this is very rare and very special whiskey, to be sure.
That really is. Again, heat. I'm glad you're clarifying and reminding me of this. Those heat cycle warehouses. Again, for the 15, you got about what, and the 18? Tell me the yields once again.
Yeah, the 15. We have some barrels that will give us large yields and some barrels that will give us very low yields. So those 15 year is approximately 40, I forget the exact number, 40 barrels.
40 barrels.
And
40
again, larger yields.
Larger yields.
Versus the 10 barrels that went into the 250
Incredible.
bottles for the 18-year-old. So that extra 3 years in heat cycling have really reduced the volume, the yield of those very special barrels. And again, I taste each and every barrel, and we'll kick some barrels out because they're not drinkable. Even though you have an age claim, you think, oh, this is great. If it doesn't taste good, it's not going to be bottled.
I know you want it to be the best it can be, and we love that you always bring us the very best. You kick some out, even of the older stuff. Hey, I mean, I'm sure there'd be a few people on the sidelines like, Hey, I just want to try some of that you
Yeah.
picked up. Where do those go?
Well, those barrels obviously will not be bottled individually as King of Kentucky.
Right.
And it's hard to imagine, but they will become little drops in the Cooper's Craft product.
Oh, really?
Yes.
They'll become just maybe one of those barrels would go into a larger dump.
Yes, where the tannin, the large wood influence, which I don't like and will not bottle, will be diluted with other younger barrels.
Interesting.
Because
That's
again,
so
this liquid is too valuable not to
Sure.
use, but we don't want its singular impact to influence anyone's flavor profile. So it will be batched in the larger batches of Cooper's Craft.
Cooper's Craft, and that would be on the 100 proof product, or both.
Yeah, or one of either the 82.2 or the 100 proof.
So, in other words, the Cooper's Craft, again, this is so interesting because I didn't know what the answer to this was. The Cooper's Craft would be anywhere from 4-year-old up to, could be in the teens, a little bit.
Yes, but again, honestly, very, very small amounts of that.
I just want to show up that day where Chris is saying, I'm going to kick this barrel aside. I want to show up that day and say, just give me a little touch of that.
Yeah.
I want to try that.
But, that's typical of our Brown-Forman batching, whether
Yes.
it's Woodford, Old Forester, or Cooper's Craft. We have no age claims on those products. And as you know, as we've talked in the past, the youngest barrels will be whatever they happen to be, the youngest. But there can be barrels in Woodford Reserve, for example, that are up to 14 years of age.
Amazing.
Or Old Forester up to 12 years of age. Again, they play a big role on a small volume influence on the overall flavor profile.
That is incredible. That is so interesting to know where those go. And again, you're looking for obviously the very best of these barrels for the King of Kentucky. That's what you've got. I'm tasting this 15-year-old now here with.
When you think that the suggested retail,
right,
not the secondary market, which we have no control over, the suggested retail of the 15-year-old is $250.
Yeah.
The suggested retail for the 18-year-old is $350. So again, that's a high financial threshold for many consumers. So we have to put out the best to justify that price.
The very best, not only old, but also something you've picked that you love. And it really is. This is so good.
Yeah.
Tell us about the bourbon itself. What do we have here? What's been in the barrel for 15 years?
Now this recipe is again one of our older recipes. That is not the Woodford recipe. It's not the Old Forester recipe. It's now called the King of Kentucky recipe. This is a 79% corn, 11% rye. It's our lowest rye content of any of our whiskeys, and 10% malted barley. So 79, 10, 11. And obviously it's been entered into a Brown-Forman Cooperage produced barrel. We make these barrels at 125 proof, not the 110 proof, for example, of Woodford, but 125 proof, and into the Brown-Forman distillery, its home, into our brick heat cycled warehousing, and there it sits for many, many years. And it has its own yeast strain. This is not the proprietary Woodford, the proprietary Old Forester yeast strains. This is a unique yeast strain. So again, using our tradition, our history, our proprietary yeast propagation philosophy, which is very different than many of the great distilleries here in Kentucky, much less the micro distilleries, making this a truly unique whiskey.
So it's the recipe, it's the yeast strain, it's all of these factors in one, which make it worthy of that title, King of Kentucky. And if you would have gone back right after Prohibition again, King of Kentucky, the brand, was an American whiskey. It was a blend of bourbon, but American whiskeys. But I understand the very oldest, one of the oldest products that you all have released, Brown-Forman, for many, many years, right? As far as one of the oldest.
Yes, coming during Prohibition and right out of Prohibition, we would have 23 and 25 year expressions of Old Forester as medicinal whiskey, because distillation, as you know, had stopped in 1918 at the Brown-Forman distillery. and the 1930 production was not ready yet. So we had very old stocks, and those weren't desired. That wasn't what you wanted. That's what you had to do. So since that period, this is the oldest releases. These are the oldest releases we have had. But now these have been planned and managed for flavor presentation, not just because we had to extend old stocks.
Sure.
So
Sure.
again, this is very well planned, and again, every barrel has been tasted because these are single barrel products, and I stand by each one now. Each barrel, and you'll have to look at your bottle of King of Kentucky to see what barrel it came from. Each one's marked; it's different. How many bottles came from that barrel? It's all handwritten on the label. So I can't talk about each and every barrel because I can't remember what all their flavor profiles are, because there will be some slight variations. What I have in my glass is the sample you had received as well. So
Yes.
all we can talk about is what we have in our hands, of course. But they're all good. They've all passed muster.
This is so. I mean, the depth of flavor, the warmth. Of course, this is what's the proof of this one again, Chris? This is 130.6,
Yes.
I believe. 130.6.
Yes.
Big proof. I mean, to me, even though the proof is quite high, this is so approachable for 130.6.
It really is. And I think that's a hallmark of our products with our unique yeast strains, our barrels, how they're toasted, how the wood is seasoned, and the use at the Brown-Forman Distillery of a thumper as the second distillation process really softens and makes the whiskey quite presentable, even at these higher proof points.
This is, I mean, it's if I was guessing, I can tell it's higher proof, but I would guess it maybe between 100, 105. I mean, it really, it's big, but it's so much lower than you would ever imagine.
They're very drinkable, that's for certain.
So good. And the autumnal notes, I just get, when I taste this, it's like big, older bourbon, lots of autumn notes, lots of those beautiful caramels, a little bit of clove. I mean, there's so much happening here.
Yeah, there's a nice spice thread running through it, certainly.
Oh man, this is so good. I mean, this is one of those that's once in a lifetime to see these two releases being truly the oldest product since post-prohibition
Yes.
that Brown-Forman has released. Do you hear about stories about the hunters out there finding a bottle and they come and see you and they say, I had to look really hard, but I found, I mean, have you heard some of these stories about how people have found the King of Kentucky?
Well, as you and I have talked in the past, I don't do a lot of social media. Well, let's put it this way.
Right.
I do zero social media, so I don't hear a lot. I don't hear a lot, which is just the way I want it. I know people enjoy this very much, and certainly, we've been involved in the regrettably, but the need for the Eastern Kentucky flood relief auction.
Yes, so
We
important.
had bottles of King, bottles of
So
Old
wonderful.
Birthday Bourbon, President's Choice, Woodford Distillery Series, Woodford Masters Collection. And it's just amazing how generous people are in that second market, those bottles going for thousands and thousands of dollars. So we know people love their King of Kentucky, certainly to spend those, even with a charitable auction aspects, to spend that much money is just eye-opening.
Yeah, it's so important what you've done. I mean, to help out those flood victims and to know that the great donations you will have made with the bourbon have helped, and people love this bourbon and they love helping. So the two in one.
They love their Kentucky bourbon in general, as we see other auction items going for very, very high amounts. But it's really fun to see ours doing so well.
It is, because they love the good stuff, and this truly is such wonderful. There's nothing quite like this one. I've always looked forward to it every year with you. King of Kentucky, I mean, it lives up to that, right? I mean, it's a very bold.
It is. In hindsight, we don't want anyone to think we're bragging, because there's so many great bourbons from Kentucky. besides our own Woodford Reserve, Old
Right.
Forester, King of Kentucky. So many great bourbons. But this is a name that goes back into the 1880s. We did not create this name. We acquired the name,
Right.
the trademark, through the acquisition of a small company, United Distiller Spirits, which is mainly a distributor here in Louisville. And the King of Kentucky references the sport of kings,
Right.
which of course is thoroughbred horse racing, which is a great connection with Brown-Forman,
Yes.
with Woodford Reserve and its sponsorship of the Kentucky Derby. But we weren't bragging, they weren't bragging. It's all about the king of sports, the horse racing
The
industry.
horse racing. That's what it's all about. I mean, it really is. It's bold. It's powerful. It's celebrating horses. It's celebrating old bourbons. Again, this is the 15-year-old out this month in August. Be watching for it. Only 3,500 bottles. And then if you can't, then again, that's Illinois, Kentucky, and Ohio, right?
Yes. And Illinois and Ohio get very little. So we keep the bulk in Kentucky
The
to say
bulks in
thank you
Kentucky.
to all of your readers and listeners
Yes.
who support Kentucky bourbon, support Brown-Forman specifically. We
Yes.
say thank you very much. Our products are going to be sold here primarily.
Yes, yes, and we love that. And of course, those 250 bottles, the 18, only in Kentucky. Be watching. If you've ever had this, I know a lot of great people that are fans of Brown-Forman and of Chris Morris watching right now live. Tell us down below if you've tried this or maybe one of your favorites that you've been able to find. I know I saw someone mentioning the Batch Proof series that was released a few months ago. People have really enjoyed that one, haven't they?
Thank you. Yeah, those are always fun. We're a fun industry and we like to have fun. So that's these special releases are creative reliefs for us. We get to work on new concepts, new flavor profiles, have a lot of fun. But they're small volumes because our bread and butter, of course, is our standard
Sure.
Reserve bourbon, double oaked, Old Forester, Whiskey Roast series as its success grows. That's our bread and butter. But these small releases allow us, again, a creative outlet to have some fun, get to visit with you. Otherwise, you'd say, I don't want to talk to you, Chris. There's nothing to talk about.
I'd talk to you. I enjoy chatting with you. I'd talk to you.
I know it. And I'm teasing you. But, yeah, it's good for us because we're like everybody else. We like a little excitement and a little change from our standard pace. And
It helps.
These certainly do.
And you all released just enough. You released just enough of it for it to keep it really interesting, but to keep us also excited about what you do so well too. I mean, I love that. It's a good balance.
That's a good point, Tom. I'm glad you brought that up. We're not releasing just a little tiny bit that virtually no one can get.
Right.
We want the Masters collection to be in the 300 barrel range. That's significant. The Distillery series to be in the 30 barrel range. We want people to have a chance to enjoy our products, but it begins because these are so hard to produce. The feasibility and scalability are so tight that that's as good as it gets, because again, the bulk of our time and our resources are devoted to making our core products.
Right.
And that's hard enough anymore.
Right.
With the difficulty in getting white oak and getting grain. I mean, my gosh, things have gotten really difficult. So we're doing well just to produce our core product. And
keeping up with demand.
These specialty products is really, again, specialty products are very special for us.
Right.
And certainly for the consumer. And this 18-year-old, just to have been able to shepherd these handful of barrels to this very high age range under heat cycle conditions, which is unique in the industry. I wish we had more, but we just don't. And we still were able to piggyback these very few 18-year-old barrels on the bottling run behind the 15-year-old. We have the glass, the labels are handwritten, so we can change that. And again, it was just an opportunity too good to pass up.
No, it is something so special, and let's mention, because you mentioned it, the challenges you're having with, and they were already happening before the pandemic. Now they're happening more and more. I've talked to many distillers. From your perspective, what are the biggest challenges that you're facing? I mean, you mentioned barrels, grain. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, yes, all of that with the explosion of interest in Kentucky bourbon, which dates back to the mid 2000s, growth seems to continue to exceed the whiskey we laid down years ago. And as we plan for the future, we're laying down whiskey, and then the numbers keep getting bigger and bigger. Everybody says it's a good problem to have, but it still is. It still is a problem because we have to acquire and produce barrels. We have to acquire grain. We have to acquire bottles to put it in years later, and all of that has just become very, very stressful. And on top of that, you have droughts and floods, and all of that impacts our agricultural partners as well. So it just seems like everything is happening all at once. And then, of course, without saying, COVID has restrained or restricted your workforce and your ability to ship things in and out because of shortage of truck drivers and fuel prices go. I mean, it's the perfect, I don't want to use the word storm, but it is the perfect
it really is,
storm. And just makes it difficult for all the bourbon suppliers from Kentucky to meet that great demand that people have for our product. And it's just managing that. Thank goodness we have good teammates who are doing that, and good partners who are supplying us. And we've gotten through it. We've sustained our growth. We've never shut our distilleries down. We're producing Old Forester and Woodford and King of Kentucky for the future. And we've been very fortunate in that regards.
And at some point, obviously the demand will continue, but hopefully a lot of the other issues, it'll balance out. I mean, that's the hope.
Yes. We have good people working on that. So I know we're in good shape.
Yeah, no, you give great team there. And you mentioned also, I wanted to touch on the heat cycled warehouses. I know a number of your warehouses are that. Talk about that a little bit. What products? Let's discuss that for a moment.
Yes, heat cycling is not a Brown-Forman invention. In fact, the legendary Colonel E.H. Taylor Jr. had patented the heat cycling concept in 1874. And heat cycling requires a very substantial building for your warehouse. And in those days, before there was modern insulation, there was no fiberglass, for example. You built thick stone or brick walls. You heated from the distillery. You had steam heat coming through your boilers, and you would heat the buildings and their contents, in other words, barrels of bourbon or rye whiskey, in the dead of winter when it's cold, because we now know when whiskey temperature in barrel drops below 53.3 degrees Fahrenheit, maturation stops. So for a number of months a year, there's no maturation. The barrel is sitting there doing essentially nothing. And the thought was, well, let that happen. Let's make that time more useful. So heat the barrels during the winter to keep maturation going. That's an expensive process. A substantial warehouse of any type of construction costs a lot. Obviously, heat bills, utility bills are expensive. And then because you're continually heating and cycling cold temperatures in, that's the cycling process, your angel share increases. So your yield, as evidenced by our 18-year-old we were talking about, the yield is less. So it is an expensive process, but it certainly enhances the maturation profile of your product. It adds, we believe through analysis, say an extra half a year to every year you're in barrel. But again, age is measured by passage of time. So 1 year is 1 year, even though your product might be more mature for the heat cycling process. And Brown-Forman, we know as early as 1914, adopted this concept. George Garvin Brown, our founder, said, no, that's pretty cool process. Let's do that. And when we acquired the historic LeBron Graham distillery to create the Woodford Reserve brand and rename the distillery Woodford Reserve, that was a heat cycled warehousing concept as well. So we bought another distillery that had been heat cycling in the past. So again, every drop of Woodford, every drop of Old Forester, Cooper's Craft, and King of Kentucky are heat cycled. So they have very rich, mature flavor profiles.
Beautiful, and it makes a big difference. Again, some questions down below, and thanks for the questions. Are all warehouses in Kentucky heat cycled that do bourbon?
No, no. Um, there are several small new craft distilleries that have copied this concept on a very small scale.
Right.
But we, of the large historic distilleries, are the only ones that heat cycle.
Only one. Yeah. So that's, again, thanks for the question. Thanks to everybody watching. That's something else that really separates what what you all do with, again, Old Forester, Woodford, King of Kentucky, everything you do that makes it so special, so rich. Again, the flavors, we're trying the King of Kentucky. This is a beautiful release, my friend. I keep on getting more spice. Is there a top note you get in addition to the spice? Is there anything else you're getting that you really love on this one?
Well, yes, this again, because of our unique Brown-Forman cooperage produced barrels in that heat cycling, there are tons of very heavy sweet aromatics, more molasses-like character, sorghum-like character. So that rich, sweet aromatic maple syrup, if you even want to go that far. But there's also a lot of fruitiness, a lot of fruit character in this, and the fruit is very caramelized, dried fruit. So I think of dates and figs and raisins, really rich wax fruit. So all of this is heavy, not heavy to be off-putting, just rich characteristics. Then you have that nice spice character, which is from that long exposure to the wood, really working well with those fruit and spice notes.
It's luscious, it's layered, it has that, you mentioned the maple syrup, honeyed. I mean, it's really just layered and brought together as just one delicious flavor. And be watching again for it this month. King of Kentucky also happening in the fall. So many great events, but we just reported earlier in the week, Chris, Woodford's doing a pop-up in Paris at one of the most beautiful airports, I think, in the world, Charles de Gaulle. That sounds pretty exciting too, the pop-up lounge you all are going to be doing.
It sure is. As Woodford Reserve grows globally, it is a focus for us, and our global travel retail team has been very heavily involved in the last few months at Heathrow, and now we're at Charles de Gaulle. And again, it's amazing to think we've been on the market now for 26 years. Going back 26 years, we barely could give a bottle of Woodford's away. Only, even in Kentucky, another bourbon, who cares? Bourbon's dying. What do we need another bourbon for? And now to think that we have carved out space in Charles de Gaulle and Heathrow, in Hong Kong Airport, places like that focus on sampling international travelers on Woodford Reserve. It's really, really cool.
It's grown so much. I
look forward to. I won't be there. I'm not going to be at Charles de Gaulle, but we have well-trained
people,
salespeople in our French operations to do that.
You won't see Chris there, but you'll see the bourbon. You'll Woodford.
That's right. That's all that matters. You don't need to see me. It's all about the bourbon.
It'll keep growing as we're doing more bourbon tastings. I'm hosting internationally, Chris. It's amazing to see going into more bars. We just used to see a couple bourbons, maybe even one in London or other Paris, but now you're seeing several, even in smaller bars. I mean, that is quite rewarding seeing Woodford back there, isn't it?
Had some friends who had vacation in France. I'm sorry, in Spain. Yes, France. But they were in Spain and they came back. Chris, we've been going to Spain for years, and now every bar we went to had Woodford Reserve on it. I'm like, oh, that's great to hear. Oh, that's wonderful. They were very happy too, of course. But it's just amazing how you seed, you work, and it takes years, and all of a sudden things start to move and start to take off, which is just really gratifying to see that.
Well done to you, my friend. You're doing wonderful work. You and the team there at Brown-Forman. Again, thanks for taking some time this evening to taste the King of Kentucky with us, Chris Morris. This is delicious. Good
Thank
luck
you.
to everyone looking for a bottle. If you can't find a bottle, hopefully you'll be at one of the world-class bars
Yes,
that we know and love having a pour of it, right?
that's right. Yeah, and I've been to a few bars in Kentucky that had King of Kentucky, so I was very excited about that. And I hope to see you in the upcoming weeks at the Kentucky Bourbon Festival, Tom.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it, my friend. Can't wait. And we will see you soon. And thanks again for everyone watching. And we'll see
Thank you
you for
all.
a bourbon soon.